Alex Hayes had spent years believing he was in complete control of his life. Every decision was calculated, every move intentional. Nothing happened without his approval. But all of that changed the moment a little girl with familiar blue eyes looked up at him and asked, "Can you take me home?" At first, it was just an odd request from a child he had never met. But as he stared into those strikingly familiar eyes, a chilling realization settled over him. This wasn't just a lost child. This was his daughter. And he had never known she existed. Alexander Hayes had spent his entire life believing that success came from control. He had built his empire with calculated precision, ensuring that nothing ever slipped through the cracks. Every decision was measured, every risk was weighed, and every part of his life followed a carefully structured plan. He had wealth, power, and influence, and he saw no need for anything else. Family had never been part of the equation. At 36, Alex had convinced himself that he wasn't meant for attachments. He had tried love once, years ago, but it had ended in heartbreak. After that, he had thrown himself into his work, perfecting his image as a ruthless businessman, a man too focused on success to be distracted by emotions. He told himself that he didn't need anyone, that his world was complete exactly as it was. But all of that changed in a single moment. That evening had started like any other. He had just finished a business dinner at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, finalizing a deal that would add millions to his company's portfolio. As he stepped out into the crisp night air, he barely paid attention to the city lights reflecting off his black Maybach, the luxury vehicle he had bought more for convenience than for show. He was reaching into his pocket for his car keys when he heard a small voice behind him. "Excuse me, mister." Alex turned, expecting to see a server or a valet. Instead, he found himself looking down at a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, her delicate features framed by thick, dark brown curls. But it was her eyes that made him freeze. Bright blue. Strikingly familiar. His pulse quickened as he stared at her. There was something unsettling about the way she looked at him, as if she knew him somehow. The girl hesitated, shifting her weight slightly before speaking again. "Can you give me a ride home?" Alex blinked, momentarily unsure if he had heard her correctly. A child, alone at night, asking a stranger for a ride, it didn't make sense. He immediately scanned the area, expecting to see a frantic parent running toward them, but the street was quiet. "Where are your parents?" he asked, his voice coming out sharper than he intended. The girl lowered her head slightly, her fingers twisting into the hem of her coat. "My mom isn't home," she said softly. "And I don't know my dad." Something cold settled in Alex's stomach. He cleared his throat, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who brought you here?" She looked up at him again, her bright blue eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. "My nanny, but she left. I didn't know what to do, so I waited." Alex exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. None of this was making sense. "What's your name?" "Lily," she answered. Lily. The name sounded soft and innocent, but it did nothing to quiet the unease creeping up his spine. He looked at her again, taking in every detail. Her dark brown hair, the slight curve of her nose, the delicate structure of her face. And those eyes. His eyes. He forced himself to push the thought aside. Coincidence. That's all it was. "Where do you live?" he asked. She gave him an address, and recognition flickered in his mind. It wasn't an upscale neighborhood, but it was safe. That didn't explain why a child had been left alone in the middle of the city, waiting outside a restaurant where she clearly didn't belong. Alex took a slow breath. He could walk away. This wasn't his problem. But something about the way Lily was looking at him, with quiet trust, with expectation, made it impossible to ignore her. He sighed. "All right. I'll take you home." Lily's face lit up with relief, as if she had never doubted that he would say yes. That unsettled him even more. As he helped her into the passenger seat, fastening her seatbelt, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his chest. There were too many questions. Too many things that didn't add up. And as he pulled away from the curb, glancing at the little girl sitting beside him, he had no idea that this moment was about to change his life forever. The car ride was quiet at first. Lily sat in the passenger seat, her small hands resting in her lap, her legs barely reaching the edge of the seat. She didn't fidget, didn't shift uncomfortably like most children would. She just sat there, composed, as if riding in a stranger's car was the most natural thing in the world. Alex tightened his grip on the steering wheel as he navigated through the city streets. He had never been particularly good with kids, never had a reason to be. He wasn't the type to soften his tone or adjust his pace for anyone, let alone a 7-year-old girl. But there was something about her that kept his mind racing, a feeling he couldn't quite place. "You shouldn't talk to strangers, you know," he finally said, keeping his eyes on the road. Lily turned her head slightly, watching him with those piercing blue eyes. "I know. Then why did you ask me for a ride?" She hesitated, her little fingers gripping the hem of her coat. "Because you looked safe." Alex almost laughed at that. Safe wasn't exactly a word most people would use to describe him. Ruthless, intimidating, efficient, those were the words he was used to hearing. But safe? That was something new. "Your mom ever tell you not to get into cars with strangers?" "Yes," Lily said simply. "Then why did you do it?" She tilted her head, as if the answer should have been obvious. "Because you're not really a stranger." That made him glance at her, just for a second. "I'm pretty sure we've never met." Lily shrugged. "You just don't remember." A strange chill ran down his spine. He turned back to the road, focusing on the address she had given him. It wasn't far now. He needed to drop her off, make sure she got home safely, and then put this whole bizarre encounter behind him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When they finally pulled up in front of a small, modest house in a quiet neighborhood, Alex cut the engine and turned to look at her. "This is your home?" Lily nodded, but for the first time, she looked hesitant. "What's wrong?" he asked. She bit her lip. "Mom doesn't like visitors." That didn't sit well with him. "You think she'll be mad you asked me for a ride?" She didn't answer right away, but then she whispered, "Maybe." Alex frowned. Something about her tone, the way she curled her fingers into the fabric of her coat, made his stomach tighten. He had dealt with enough people in his life to know when someone was hiding something. "You want me to walk you to the door?" he asked carefully. Lily hesitated, then nodded. Alex sighed and stepped out of the car, walking around to open the door for her. She climbed out, and he followed her up the small walkway leading to the front door. The house wasn't in bad shape, but it wasn't the kind of place he would have expected. There was no sign of luxury, no indication that the woman inside had once been part of his world. Before Lily could knock, the door swung open. A woman stood there, and Alex felt his breath catch in his throat. Rachel. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, with memories that had been buried for years. Rachel's eyes widened in shock, flickering between Alex and Lily. Her face paled as realization set in. "Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lily glanced between them, confusion written all over her small face. "Mom." Alex's entire world tilted. Because in that instant, with Rachel standing before him and Lily looking up at her expectantly, he finally understood why the little girl seemed so familiar. She wasn't just any child. She was his. For a long moment, Alex couldn't move. He couldn't think. The world around him blurred, and all that existed was the woman standing in front of him and the little girl at his side. The realization hit him like a physical force, knocking the air from his lungs. Rachel. His Rachel. The woman he had once loved. The woman who had walked away without an explanation, vanishing from his life as if she had never been there at all. And now, standing before him, was proof of what she had taken with her. His daughter. Lily shifted beside him, sensing the tension. Rachel's face was pale, her hands gripping the doorframe as if she needed something to hold on to. "Alex," she breathed, her voice barely more than a whisper. He hadn't heard her say his name in years, and yet it still had the same effect. A mix of longing, anger, and something deeper, something raw and unfinished. "You know him?" Lily asked, looking between them with wide eyes. Rachel swallowed hard, then forced a smile. "Sweetheart, go inside, okay?" Lily hesitated, glancing up at Alex. He could tell she didn't want to go, that she wanted answers just as much as he did. But after a moment, she nodded and stepped into the house. Rachel turned back to him, exhaling shakily. "Alex, I can explain." "Explain?" The word came out sharper than he intended. He stepped forward, lowering his voice so Lily wouldn't hear. "You can explain how I have a daughter I never knew about. You can explain how you disappeared from my life, took my child, and never told me." Rachel flinched, her fingers tightening around the doorframe. "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me how it was," he said, his jaw clenched. She hesitated, then stepped back, motioning for him to come inside. Alex didn't think twice. He followed her into the house, his pulse hammering in his ears. The living room was small but cozy, decorated with warm colors and scattered toys. A family home. His daughter's home. Lily had settled onto the couch, hugging a stuffed animal as she watched them carefully. Alex felt another pang of something he couldn't name. She was trying to understand what was happening, just like he was. Rachel turned to him, wrapping her arms around herself. "I never meant for you to find out like this." "Then when?" His voice was low, controlled, but the anger was there, simmering beneath the surface. "When were you going to tell me, Rachel? When she turned 18? When she got married? Or were you just never going to tell me at all?" She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. "I didn't know I was pregnant when I left, Alex." That stopped him. He stared at her, processing her words. "What?" She looked up at him, her eyes filled with something that looked like regret. "When we broke up, I didn't know. I found out weeks later, and by then, it felt too late. You had made it clear that your work was your priority, that family wasn't something you wanted." Alex opened his mouth to argue, but she continued. "I told myself I was doing the right thing," she said. "That if I told you, you'd feel obligated, and I didn't want that. I didn't want you to resent her, to resent me. So I convinced myself that she would be better off without you." His chest tightened. "You had no right to make that decision for me." Rachel exhaled shakily. "I know." Silence filled the space between them. The weight of 4 lost years pressed down on Alex's shoulders. He had a daughter. A little girl who had gone to sleep every night without knowing he existed. A little girl who had grown up without a father because Rachel had made a choice she had no right to make. And yet, as angry as he was, he could see the guilt in her eyes. The way she held herself, the way her voice wavered, she wasn't proud of what she had done. She had been scared. But that didn't change the fact that he had missed so much. He turned, looking at Lily. She was watching him carefully, studying him with the same quiet curiosity she had shown in the car. She had no idea how much had just changed. How much had just been revealed. "I want to know her," Alex said finally, his voice firm but calm. "I want to be in her life." Rachel's breath hitched. "Alex." He shook his head. "You've had 4 years to raise her on your own. But she's my daughter too. And I will not walk away now that I know she exists." Rachel hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay. Alex let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. This wasn't going to be easy. He had missed too much time, and there was no way to get it back. But he wasn't going to let that stop him. Because for the first time in his life, there was something more important than his career. And he wasn't going to lose her. The next few days were a blur for Alex. His entire world had shifted, yet he was expected to go about his life as if nothing had changed. Meetings, phone calls, contracts, none of it seemed to matter anymore. Every free moment, his thoughts drifted back to the little girl with bright blue eyes who had unknowingly walked into his life and turned it upside down. Lily was his daughter. His flesh and blood. And for 4 years, he had never known she existed. That reality weighed on him more than he could put into words. He had spent years chasing success, believing he was in control of everything, but this? This was proof of how much had slipped through his fingers. Rachel had agreed to let him see Lily, but she had made it clear that it would take time. He couldn't just walk into her life and expect her to suddenly understand who he was. She had lived 4 years without a father, and now she needed to ease into the idea of having one. It was frustrating, but Alex understood. He wasn't about to push his way in and overwhelm her. But he wasn't going to disappear either. So when Rachel texted him later that week, telling him he could come by to spend some time with Lily, he cleared his entire schedule. Nothing mattered more than this. When he arrived at Rachel's house, he hesitated for a moment before knocking. The door opened a few seconds later, and Rachel stood there, looking uncertain but not unkind. "She's in the backyard," she said, stepping aside to let him in. Alex walked through the house, taking in the small but cozy space. There were touches of Lily everywhere, crayon drawings on the fridge, a tiny pair of sneakers by the door, a bookshelf filled with colorful storybooks. It was a home. A home where his daughter had grown up without him. When he stepped outside, he spotted her immediately. Lily was sitting on the grass with a set of building blocks, carefully stacking them one by one. She hadn't noticed him yet. Rachel cleared her throat. "Lily, honey. There's someone here to see you." Lily looked up, her blue eyes meeting his. For a moment, she just stared at him, as if trying to place him, trying to remember where she had seen him before. Then, recognition flickered across her face. "You're the man from the car," she said matter-of-factly. Alex swallowed, forcing a small smile. "Yeah. That was me." She studied him for a moment longer, then glanced at Rachel. "Why is he here?" Rachel crouched down beside her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Remember how I told you that sometimes families have surprises?" Lily nodded slowly. "Well," Rachel said gently, "Alex is a special kind of surprise. He's..." She hesitated, then looked up at Alex, giving him the chance to say it himself. Alex took a breath and crouched down so he was at eye level with her. "Lily," he said carefully, "I just found out something really important. Something I wish I had known a long time ago." Lily blinked, waiting. "I'm your dad," he said softly. Her small brows furrowed. She didn't speak right away, didn't react the way he had feared she might. She didn't cry, didn't run away. She just looked at him, her little mind working through the words. After a moment, she tilted her head. "But I don't know you." The words hit hard, but he had expected them. "I know," he admitted. "And that's why I want to spend time with you. So you can get to know me." Lily looked at Rachel again, and Rachel nodded reassuringly. Slowly, Lily turned back to Alex. "How?" Alex smiled. "Well, I could help you with those blocks. If you want." Lily studied him for a moment, then finally gave a small nod. "Okay." It wasn't much, but it was a start. He sat down in the grass beside her, careful not to disrupt her tower of blocks. She handed him one without a word, watching to see what he would do. He placed it on top of the stack, glancing at her to see if he had done it right. Lily inspected his work, then nodded approvingly. Not bad. Alex let out a small chuckle, relieved that she hadn't shut him out completely. Rachel watched from a few feet away, her arms crossed as if she was bracing herself for something. But there was something else in her expression too, something softer, something almost hopeful. They still had a long way to go. But for the first time, Alex truly believed they could get there. Over the next few weeks, Alex did something he had never done before. He rearranged his entire life for someone else. His days, once packed with back-to-back meetings, high-stakes negotiations, and business trips, were now scheduled around visits with Lily. He didn't care if his assistants were confused by his sudden availability in the afternoons or if his colleagues raised eyebrows at his newfound flexibility. None of it mattered. The first few visits were tentative. Lily was polite but reserved, treating him like a guest rather than someone she truly knew. She was cautious, watching him carefully as if trying to figure out what kind of person he really was. He couldn't blame her. He was a stranger to her, someone who had appeared out of nowhere and claimed to be her father. Trust wasn't something that could be forced, and he knew he had to earn it. He started small, following her lead. When she wanted to draw, he sat beside her with a crayon in hand, even though he had no idea what he was doing. When she wanted to play outside, he chased her through the yard, letting her win every time. When she asked him to read her a bedtime story one evening, something he hadn't expected, he sat by her bed, his voice softer than usual as he read page after page. Rachel watched it all with careful eyes. She was never far, hovering just enough to make sure Lily felt safe but never interfering. It was clear that she still didn't know what to make of him being in their lives, and Alex couldn't blame her for that either. He had spent 4 years absent, and now he was trying to make up for lost time. One afternoon, as they sat at the kitchen table coloring together, Lily suddenly spoke without looking up from her paper. "Are you gonna leave?" Alex's heart clenched. He set his crayon down, studying her face. "Why do you think I would?" She shrugged, still focused on her drawing. "People leave." He exhaled slowly, understanding more in that moment than she probably meant to reveal. She had been let down before. Maybe not by Rachel, but by others. Maybe she had been told that people would stay, only for them to disappear later. Maybe she was afraid he would do the same. He leaned forward slightly, making sure she could hear the certainty in his voice. "I'm not going anywhere, Lily." She finally looked up at him, her bright blue eyes searching his face as if testing whether or not she could believe him. "You promise?" It was such a simple question, but Alex knew it meant everything. He nodded. "I promise." Lily studied him for another second before nodding to herself, as if filing away his answer for later. Then, just like that, she picked up another crayon and kept coloring, as if she hadn't just asked him something that nearly broke him. That night, as he was getting ready to leave, Rachel walked him to the door. She was quiet at first, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "She likes you," she finally said. Alex glanced back toward the living room, where Lily's latest drawing sat on the table, a picture of the two of them, hand in hand. "I like her too," he admitted. Rachel hesitated before speaking again. "I was scared to let you in," she said softly. "I still am." He turned to face her fully, sensing the weight behind her words. "I get that. But I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." Rachel nodded slowly, as if finally allowing herself to believe him. It wasn't a perfect beginning. It wasn't easy. But it was real. And for the first time, Alex knew he had something worth fighting for. Alex was starting to realize that being a father wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about showing up, again and again, even when it was inconvenient, even when it was messy. It was about consistency, about proving, through actions, not words, that he wasn't going anywhere. Every visit with Lily felt like another step forward. At first, she had been hesitant, treating him like an unfamiliar guest in her world. But as time passed, that hesitation faded. Now, she greeted him at the door with an excited smile, tugging on his hand as she pulled him toward whatever activity she had planned for the day. She started asking him things too, little things that seemed insignificant but meant everything to him. What was his favorite color? Did he like ice cream? Had he ever seen a dolphin? She asked questions the way kids did, with endless curiosity, but Alex knew what she was really doing. She was learning about him, piecing him together bit by bit, trying to understand who he was and if he was someone she could trust. One afternoon, Rachel asked him if he wanted to pick Lily up from preschool. It was a simple request, something any parent would do without a second thought. But to Alex, it meant everything. It meant she was trusting him, letting him take on something normal, something real. He arrived at the small school, feeling more out of place than he ever had in a high-stakes business meeting. Parents stood in clusters, chatting while they waited for their children. Alex had no idea how this worked, but before he could second-guess himself, the doors opened, and a flood of kids rushed out. Lily was easy to spot, her dark brown curls bouncing as she scanned the crowd. The second she saw him, her entire face lit up, and she ran toward him at full speed. "Daddy," she called out. The word stopped him in his tracks. She had never called him that before. His heart pounded as she reached him, throwing her arms around his waist without hesitation. He hugged her back, stunned, overwhelmed, but more certain than ever that this was exactly where he was supposed to be. "Did you have a good day?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Lily pulled back, nodding enthusiastically. "I drew you a picture." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, unfolding it with the kind of pride only a child could have. It was a drawing of the two of them, hand in hand. And for the first time, under his stick figure, she had written one word. "Daddy." He swallowed hard, trying to keep his emotions in check. "I love it," he said, meaning every word. That night, after dropping Lily off, Rachel lingered by the door longer than usual. She had seen the drawing. She had seen how happy Lily had been when she came home. "She called you Daddy today," Rachel said softly. Alex nodded, still feeling the weight of it. "Yeah. She did." Rachel hesitated before meeting his eyes. "You're really not going anywhere, are you?" Alex exhaled, knowing she wasn't just asking about Lily. She was asking about them, about the past, about whether or not he could really be the man she and their daughter needed. "No," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not." Rachel studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay." It was just one word, but he knew it meant everything. They weren't there yet. There were still things to work through, still time that couldn't be rewritten. But for the first time, it felt like they were on the right path. And Alex wasn't about to let go. Alex hadn't realized how much his life had changed until one evening, when he caught himself in an unfamiliar routine. He was sitting at the small dining table in Rachel's kitchen, helping Lily cut out paper hearts for an art project. His suit jacket was draped over the back of a chair, his sleeves were rolled up, and there were bits of red and pink paper scattered across the table. A few months ago, he would have been in his office, reviewing reports or on a late-night business call. But now, he was here, in a warm, lived-in space, surrounded by laughter and the smell of homemade pasta. Lily giggled as she held up one of the hearts. It was lopsided, but she grinned at it like it was a masterpiece. "This one is for you," she announced, pressing it into his palm. Alex looked down at the uneven heart, something tightening in his chest. It was just a small piece of paper, but it meant everything. "Thank you, sweetheart," he said, tucking it safely into his pocket. Rachel, who had been leaning against the counter watching them, shook her head with a soft smile. "She's been talking about this all week. You'd think Valentine's Day was a national holiday the way she's treating it." Lily gasped dramatically. It is. Alex chuckled, but his mind lingered on Rachel. She looked different tonight, less guarded, more at ease. He wasn't sure when it had started happening, but she had stopped watching him with suspicion. Instead of waiting for him to fail, she seemed to be accepting the fact that he was here to stay. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Alex helped Rachel clean up. It had become a habit, staying a little longer, making sure everything was settled before he left. She really loves spending time with you, Rachel said as she dried a plate. Alex met her eyes, setting down the towel he had been using. And I love spending time with her. Rachel hesitated for a moment before speaking again. You're really good with her. It wasn't just a compliment. It was an acknowledgement. A recognition of what he had become. I'm trying, he admitted. I know I can't make up for the time I lost, but I want to be the father she deserves. Rachel studied him for a long moment. You already are. The words hit him harder than he expected. He had spent so much time proving himself, to Rachel, to Lily, even to himself, that he hadn't realized he had already become what he had hoped to be. Rachel sighed, placing the last dish in the cabinet. You know, I used to imagine this sometimes, she said quietly. What it would be like if things had been different. If we had figured this out before. Alex swallowed, stepping closer. We can't change the past, Rachel. But we can figure out the future. She looked up at him, something unreadable in her expression. And what does that future look like to you? He didn't hesitate. You. Lily. Us. Rachel let out a slow breath, and for the first time, she didn't look afraid of the idea. For so long, he had been trying to prove he was worthy of being in Lily's life. But now, as he stood there, looking at the woman he had never truly stopped loving, he realized something else. He wasn't just fighting for his daughter. He was fighting for their family. And for the first time, it felt like he might just win. Alex had spent his entire life chasing success, believing that wealth and power were the only things that mattered. But now, sitting on the couch in Rachel's living room with Lily curled up beside him, her small head resting against his arm as she drifted off to sleep, he realized that he had been chasing the wrong things all along. It had been months since that night outside Rachel's house, when he had first learned the truth. Months since his carefully controlled world had been flipped upside down by a little girl with blue eyes just like his. And now, he couldn't imagine his life without her. He had gone from being a stranger to someone Lily ran to the second she saw him. From an outsider to the person she trusted to tuck her in at night when he stayed late. From a man who had spent years believing he wasn't meant to be a father to someone who now knew he was meant for this all along. Rachel walked in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel, and smiled softly at the sight of Lily asleep against him. She's getting comfortable with you. Alex looked down at the little girl, warmth spreading through his chest. Yeah, he said, his voice quieter than usual. She is. Rachel hesitated for a moment before sitting beside him on the other end of the couch. There was still so much unspoken between them, so much history that hadn't yet been addressed. But the distance between them had lessened. The walls she had built weren't as high as they used to be. You were right, you know, she said softly. Alex turned his head toward her. About what? She exhaled slowly, her fingers absent-mindedly smoothing out the fabric of the couch. About me taking the choice away from you. About not telling you about Lily. Alex didn't respond right away. A few months ago, he might have reacted differently. He might have let his anger drive the conversation, reminding her of everything he had missed, everything he had lost. But now, after spending time with Lily, after seeing the way Rachel had raised her, after understanding the fear and uncertainty she must have felt, he didn't want to argue about the past. He just wanted to move forward. I wish I had known sooner, he admitted. But I'm here now. That's what matters. Rachel met his gaze, searching his face for something. Then, after a long pause, she nodded. You are, she said, almost to herself. You really are. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that came when words weren't necessary, when everything important had already been said. Lily stirred slightly against him, shifting before settling again, and Alex instinctively placed a gentle hand on her back, steadying her. Rachel watched the movement, something unreadable flickering in her expression. She loves you, she said quietly. Alex swallowed, the weight of those words settling deep in his chest. I love her too. Rachel nodded slowly, her gaze lingering on him. Then, she reached for a blanket and carefully draped it over Lily's small frame. Alex didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know how long it would take for Rachel to fully trust him again, or what the future would look like for all three of them. But as he sat there, his daughter asleep against him and Rachel beside him, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going anywhere. This wasn't just a temporary moment in his life. This was home. The ending of this story is deeply satisfying because it highlights real emotional growth, redemption, and the power of second chances. Alex starts as a man who believes he has everything, wealth, power, and control, but in reality, his life is incomplete. His discovery of Lily isn't just about finding out he has a daughter, it's about realizing that success means nothing without love, connection, and family. What makes this conclusion powerful is its realism. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. Rachel doesn't immediately forgive him, and Lily doesn't instantly accept him as her father. Instead, Alex has to prove himself through actions, not words. He has to show up, be present, and earn his place in their lives. By the end, he doesn't just claim the title of father, he lives it, fully and completely. Rachel's arc is just as important. She spent years believing she was protecting Lily by keeping Alex away, but she also carried guilt and doubt. Seeing Alex step up, not because he has to but because he wants to, allows her to let go of the past and start believing in a future where they can be a family. The final moment, where Alex sits with Lily asleep against him and Rachel quietly accepting his presence, is perfect in its simplicity. It's not a dramatic declaration or a rushed romance. It's quiet, steady, and full of unspoken understanding. It shows that healing takes time, but when love is real, it finds its way. This isn't just a story about unexpected fatherhood, it's about finding home in places you never thought to look. And in the end, that's what makes it truly meaningful.